Most people think their life is shaped by what they do, but Neville Goddard revealed a far more shocking truth. Your life is shaped by what you allow yourself to think, not the loud thoughts you notice, the quiet ones, the subtle inner comments, the assumptions you've rehearsed for so long they don't even feel like choices anymore. Those are the thoughts building your reality right now. And here's the paradox no one talks about. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you're aware of being. You can desire abundance and still be aware of lack. You can pray for change and still be aware of fear. Awareness is the hidden switch that decides which thoughts become your world and which ones fade into nothing. But what if you could shift that awareness on command? What if you could train your inner world to work for you instead of against you? What if changing your life began not with effort, but with noticing? Today, you'll understand why every thought creates and how awareness becomes the key that finally unlocks the life you've been trying to reach for years. He always says that people underestimate the power of the thoughts they entertain when no one is watching. It's in those quiet mental moments that life starts rearranging itself behind the scenes. Even a quick, "this probably won't work," leaves a trace inside consciousness. Neville Goddard taught that every thought creates, even the tiny ones we treat as harmless. And once someone truly sees this, something in them begins to shift. Most people don't notice how their thoughts bleed into their behavior, choices, energy, and reactions. They think they're only thinking, but they're actually shaping outcomes. It's like adding a drop of dye to water. One drop seems meaningless until the entire bowl changes color. That's how law of assumption thoughts silently operate. And awakening to this is the first real step toward transformation. He learned early on that the phrases we grow up hearing, "money is hard," "life isn't fair," "don't expect too much," keep echoing long after childhood. These little seeds stay alive, influencing reactions and assumptions. We walk through life carrying these imprints without even knowing why we feel or act a certain way. Neville would remind his students that awareness is the key Neville emphasized constantly. Seeing the imprint is how you start dissolving it. A person may quickly think, "I'm not enough, I don't deserve it, things always go wrong for me," and they believe it's just a fleeting moment. But these mental flashes create the state the person lives from. The outer world simply mirrors this inner conversation back. Inner conversation, Neville Goddard taught, is not metaphorical. It is literal creation. The whispers become the life. He often explains to his students that thoughts are like invisible bricks. One brick doesn't build anything, but thousands of them build a reality. That's why the small, unnoticed thoughts are the most dangerous and the most powerful. There is no off switch to the creative process. Even during a simple morning routine, imagination creates reality through habitual thinking. And once someone grasps this, they begin watching what they allow inside. Even when someone says, "I'm not thinking about anything," they are resting in a state. And a state speaks louder than a specific sentence. Neville taught that to shift your state, Neville's style is not about forcing new thoughts. It's about changing the emotional climate you live in. Even the quiet mind has a tone, an expectation, a familiar feeling. And that tone becomes the blueprint for what unfolds. He once shared that his results changed dramatically when he stopped focusing only on important thoughts and started training the tiny ones. The way he looked at a bill, the way he ended a conversation, the way he thought about a day before it even started. The little shifts made the big outcomes easy. That's the heart of the feeling it real Neville method, mastering the subtle. When you master the small, the big takes care of itself. Imagine letting thoughts run wild like kids playing unsupervised. They don't mean harm, but they make a mess. Thoughts do the same. They run to the oldest corners of your mind, repeating what they find there. That's why awareness must be gentle but steady, not aggressive, not harsh, just conscious. Consciousness cleans up the mess without drama. When someone realizes that every thought creates, Neville Goddard wasn't being poetic but literal, their life view changes. They stop believing the world happens to them and start seeing that the world responds to them. Life becomes less chaotic and more coherent. The puzzle pieces finally fit, and the invisible mechanism becomes clear. And from that clarity comes the power to rebuild anything. He teaches that every mental impression, from the smallest to the largest, is a signature sent into the universe. Most people only notice results, never the tiny causes. But those who learn to watch the microscopic shift the macroscopic. And that understanding naturally leads into the next level, Neville's deeper explanation of imagination and thought as creative acts. He always begins this part by reminding the listener that imagination is not a fantasy. It's the blueprint of every outcome that later appears in the physical world. Neville Goddard would repeat that imagination creates reality not symbolically, but mechanically. The moment a person accepts an inner picture as true, life begins quietly shifting to match it. It's subtle at first, but everything starts rearranging behind the scenes. Most people think they need physical effort to change their lives, yet Neville insisted the real work happens in consciousness. He taught that the law of assumption thoughts operate like gravity. Once a thought is accepted, it pulls circumstances into alignment. It doesn't matter if the idea is empowering or limiting. The mind treats both as instructions, and once accepted, reality follows without negotiation. He liked giving the example of someone imagining being financially stable. The moment the idea feels real, even for a second, the person starts thinking differently, behaving differently, interpreting the world differently. They make different decisions without forcing anything. It's like switching tracks in the mind. The train of reality simply begins moving in a new direction. That's the quiet brilliance of feeling it real Neville style. When someone accepts an inner picture, the subconscious takes it literally. Neville used to say the subconscious never asks, "Is this what you want?" It simply receives the assumption and begins building from it. Accepting an idea is like planting a seed. Life grows around it. And sometimes the person doesn't even realize their acceptance happened in a tiny moment. Yet that moment changes everything. He often explained that accepting an idea is not the same as hoping for it. Hope has hesitation in it. Acceptance is final. It's the difference between "I wish this were true" and "this is who I am now," and the shift is felt instantly. A person carries themselves differently, even if their external world hasn't changed yet. That inner shift is the birthplace of the outer shift. Neville believed that once an idea is accepted as true, the outer world becomes a servant to that inner truth. People you haven't met yet, opportunities you didn't know existed, and situations you couldn't predict begin moving. It's not magic, it's structure. The universe reorganizes itself around your new identity, even when you can't see the movement happening. He used to describe imagination as the silent architect of destiny. While others say, "Be realistic," Neville would say, "Be faithful to your inner reality." Because the physical world is always one step behind consciousness. Accepting an idea today shapes the experiences that appear tomorrow. The mind imagines first, the world adjusts second. That's the natural order. Someone might imagine a new version of themselves once and feel nothing change physically, but that single acceptance triggers the beginning of a new state. Over the next days, they think new thoughts, notice new opportunities, and interpret old situations differently. Everything subtly aligns. Awareness is the key Neville emphasized. Seeing how the shift is unfolding keeps the person steady. When a person accepts an idea aligned with their desire, they begin living from it instead of toward it. They stop waiting, stop begging, stop negotiating with life. They simply carry the assumption as truth, and this quiet certainty opens doors effortlessly. The world responds as if it already knew who they'd become long before they did. And this understanding naturally leads into the next realization. The biggest misconception people have is believing only their big thoughts matter, when in truth, it's the unconscious repeated patterns that build their entire reality. He often leans in at this point and says, "Here's where most people get it wrong. They believe the universe reacts only to the dramatic thoughts, the declarations, the moments of inspiration, the affirmations shouted with conviction." But Neville Goddard would insist that every thought creates, especially the small ones repeated automatically. It's the quiet mental habits, not the grand moments, that shape a life. People can visualize wealth for 10 minutes, but spend the rest of the day worrying about bills. The mind doesn't follow enthusiasm, it follows consistency. The law of assumption thoughts operate through repetition, not intensity. It's the inner conversation someone has while brushing their teeth, checking their bank app, waiting in line. Those tiny reactions reveal their true state, and the state is what creates. He liked comparing big thoughts to fireworks, bright, exciting, loud, but short-lived. The unconscious patterns are like the steady hum of electricity powering the whole house. You don't notice them, but they run everything. Inner conversation, Neville Goddard highlighted, is usually not dramatic. It's subtle and habitual, and those subtle patterns quietly determine what a person experiences. Someone might think, "I am abundant" in the morning, but sigh with discouragement when seeing the price of something later. That sigh is the real state speaking. It's those micro-reactions that reveal what someone truly assumes about themselves. Awareness is the key, Neville taught, because until someone notices these small habits, they remain ruled by them without knowing. He once told a story about a woman who prayed for a new life every night, but lived the same patterns every day, the same anxieties, the same assumptions, the same emotional tone. Nothing changed until she noticed the tiny thoughts she kept feeding unconsciously. When she shifted those, her whole world rearranged in weeks. The small thoughts were the root. The big ones were just decoration. The mistake people make is believing they only need to think positive in bursts. But imagination creates reality through the atmosphere a person lives in, not individual moments. It's like perfume. One spray fades quickly, but wearing it all day changes how everyone experiences you. The state is the perfume. The thoughts are the scent, and the scent people live in becomes their life. He explains that unconscious patterns are often inherited from family, culture, past experiences. Someone may not even realize they carry the same tone their parents lived in, but the law doesn't discriminate. Repeated assumptions become identity, and identity becomes fate. That's why to shift your state Neville style requires noticing what the mind does on autopilot. A person might say, "I'm ready for love," but automatically assume abandonment when someone doesn't text back. They might say, "I'll be successful," but shrink the moment an opportunity feels too big. These automatic reactions are the real creators. They reveal the state a person actually occupies, the one the world responds to consistently. He often reassures his students that this isn't a problem, it's power. Because once someone becomes aware of these micro-thoughts, they can finally take authorship of them. Nothing is too small to shift. Every sigh, every assumption, every probably not, every quiet fear can be gently replaced. And replacing even one begins altering the entire internal landscape. And understanding this sets the stage for the next layer of transformation. If the small patterns create the life, then the only way to change the life is to become aware of the patterns, which leads directly into the truth Neville emphasized over and over. Awareness is the key. He always says that real power begins the moment someone notices what their mind is doing when it thinks no one is paying attention. Awareness is the key, Neville repeated in nearly every lecture, because without awareness, a person lives on autopilot. They assume thoughts happen to them, rather than seeing that thoughts are habits they can choose. The instant someone becomes aware, authorship returns to their hands. Most people think the mind is this wild creature wandering freely, but awareness is the light that tames it, not through force but through observation. When someone catches themselves imagining the worst, doubting their worth or rehearsing old fears, they finally see the mechanics behind their experiences. Every thought creates, but only awareness gives someone the ability to select which thoughts deserve energy. Neville explained that inner conversation is the steering wheel of reality. When someone becomes aware of that conversation, the entire direction of their life can change. Inner conversation, Neville Goddard taught, is always active, shaping the emotional atmosphere a person lives in. Awareness doesn't silence the mind, it guides it. It helps someone choose the inner tone that matches the life they actually want. Imagine someone who always reacts with anxiety before checking their bank account. They think the anxiety just happens, but the moment they become aware of it, they see the pattern, the same feeling, the same thought, the same assumption every time. With awareness, they're no longer the passenger, they're the driver. Awareness opens the door to shift your state Neville style, simply by noticing the old script. He often said that awareness works like turning on a light in a messy room. The mess was always there, but now you can see it. Once someone notices their habitual inner talk, "I'm not good enough, things never work out, as this won't last," they can finally rewrite it. Without awareness, those thoughts run unchecked. With awareness, even the oldest patterns can dissolve. People assume awareness feels dramatic, but most of the time it's gentle. It's catching a negative thought, smiling at it, and choosing differently. It's noticing the tone behind the words. It's realizing that imagination creates reality every single time, not just during visualization. Awareness transforms unconscious reaction into conscious creation. It turns noise into choice. Neville would tell his students that awareness is the moment responsibility becomes freedom. Instead of blaming circumstances, a person sees how their internal assumptions shape those circumstances. They stop trying to control the world and start adjusting their inner climate instead. And life responds differently because they respond differently. Awareness replaces effort. He often described awareness as a kind of spiritual maturity, recognizing that the mind is a tool, not a master. When someone becomes aware, they stop fighting their thoughts and start understanding them. They stop fearing their imagination and start using it. Awareness is not perfection, it's presence, and presence is where all creation begins. Someone who becomes aware of their thoughts gains the power to interrupt spirals, soften reactions, and choose a new feeling. Feeling it real Neville method becomes effortless because awareness reveals when someone has slipped back into the old state. Awareness doesn't demand discipline, it invites clarity, and clarity creates peace, even before the manifestation arrives. And once someone understands that awareness is the key, the next natural step emerges. If awareness reveals the old inner dialogue, the practice is learning to gently shift it, exactly what the next topic explores. He always reminds people that this work isn't about intensity, it's about consistency. The power lies in the small pauses, those moments when someone stops, listens inward, and notices what their mind is quietly assuming. Throughout the day, he suggests observing that inner talk without judgment. Every thought creates, but awareness gives someone the chance to choose differently each time. Neville taught that shifting your state doesn't require force, it requires intention. When someone notices their inner conversation drifting toward doubt, fear, or old patterns, they can gently guide it back, not with pressure, but with familiarity. Inner conversation, Neville Goddard emphasized, becomes easier to redirect when someone treats it like training a friendly dog, not scolding, just guiding back to the preferred path. Imagine someone wanting financial stability. Throughout the day, tiny moments of worry may appear. A price tag, a bill, a thought about the future. The practice is not to fight these thoughts, but to notice them. Then shift to the feeling it real Neville method, imagining what it feels like to already be stable, supported, and secure. Each small shift becomes a vote for the new reality. He encourages people to treat their mind like a child learning a new language. At first, the old words come automatically: fear, scarcity, self-doubt. But with repetition, new words replace them. The language of, I am supported, things work in my favor, I already am what I desire. This isn't delusion, it's alignment. It's the law of assumption thoughts in action. The practice becomes surprisingly simple. Pause, listen, redirect. Someone might catch themselves thinking, nothing ever works out for me. Instead of spiraling, they pause, they breathe, they shift the inner tone toward the fulfilled end. My life is unfolding in ways I can't yet see. This gentle correction plants new seeds, and imagination creates reality from these seeds, not from the old ones. Neville often said that the goal isn't to eliminate all negative thoughts. They're part of being human. The goal is to not live from them. When someone notices an old assumption rising, they can smile at it, acknowledge it, and choose again. The shift doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be sincere. Slowly, the inner talk begins to favor the new state more naturally. He encourages people to practice in neutral moments, washing dishes, walking outside, taking a shower. These are perfect times to reinforce the fulfilled end. If someone desires love, they can imagine the feeling of being chosen. If they desire abundance, they can feel the quiet security of having enough. These small rehearsals build emotional muscle, and that emotional muscle becomes identity. Throughout the day, the world will offer little triggers, delays, rejections, inconveniences, but each one becomes an opportunity to strengthen the new state. Instead of collapsing into old reactions, someone can breathe into the new assumption. Awareness is the key Neville taught, and practice is the bridge. Practice turns knowing into being. As someone keeps redirecting their inner talk, something surprising happens. The inner shift becomes easier than staying in the old state. The old reactions feel foreign, the new ones feel natural. That's when the transformation is close. The world begins adjusting in response to this stable internal alignment. And it's exactly this shift, from thought to feeling, that unlocks even deeper power, leading into the next topic, the emotional fuel that turns ideas into manifested reality. He always says that thoughts alone are like dry seeds. They hold potential, but they don't grow until they're watered by feeling. Neville Goddard insisted that feeling is the secret because emotion is what makes the mind accept an idea as real. The moment someone feels the truth of a desire, even slightly, the subconscious begins treating it as a fact. Every thought creates, but feeling is what activates the creation. Most people try to manifest by thinking harder, repeating affirmations, or forcing positive thoughts. But Neville explained that it's not mental effort that moves reality. It's emotional acceptance. Relief, gratitude, and quiet expectancy are the emotional signatures of someone already living in the end. When the inner atmosphere carries those feelings, the law of assumption thoughts begin rearranging everything to match. Imagine someone desiring financial abundance. Thinking, "I'm wealthy," may feel empty, but imagining the relief of paid bills, the gratitude of ease, or the calm certainty of being supported, that emotional shift changes the entire internal landscape. Feeling it real Neville method means embodying the emotional tone of the fulfilled desire before anything changes outside. And that tone becomes the blueprint. He often compares feelings to the electrical current behind a light bulb. The thought is the bulb, but the feeling is the power that makes it glow. Without emotion, the idea stays dark, potential without expression. But when a person feels the desire as though it were already theirs, the subconscious lights up. It begins building the outer world from that emotional imprint. Many people worry they can't feel enough, but Neville reassured them, you don't need intensity, you need sincerity. A subtle feeling of ease, a soft breath of relief, a quiet yes in the heart is enough. It's not about fireworks, it's about alignment. Even small emotional shifts become powerful seeds because the subconscious responds to tone, not volume. He would tell his students that gratitude is one of the strongest emotional bridges to manifestation. When someone feels grateful in advance, they signal to their mind that the desire is already a lived experience, and imagination creates reality by following the emotional state. Gratitude collapses the distance between wanting and having. It makes the end feel present, not future. Expectancy is another emotional key, not the anxious "when will it happen," but the quiet confidence of course it's unfolding. Expectancy is the emotional proof that a person has shifted states. You can feel it in their posture, their tone, their choices. They begin living from the answer, not toward it, and the world rises to meet that new identity. Relief is equally powerful. Many people don't realize how heavy their desires feel until they imagine them fulfilled. One breath of relief reveals how much tension they've been carrying. This release tells the subconscious that the problem is already solved. And once the subconscious accepts that truth, the law begins moving pieces in ways the person could never orchestrate logically. He reminds everyone that emotion doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be genuine. A single moment of truly feeling the end can outweigh hours of forced visualization. Feeling is the language of the subconscious, and once the subconscious gets the message, it doesn't forget. It begins directing life toward the assumed conclusion with precision. And understanding this emotional dimension naturally prepares someone for the next lesson. What to do when old thoughts resurface, because they will, and how to respond from the new state rather than the old story. He always reassures people that old thoughts coming back is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of transition. When someone shifts states, the mind often echoes the old story out of habit. Neville Goddard taught that every thought creates, but not every thought deserves attention. Old thoughts are just leftovers from who someone used to be. They only regain power if the person believes they're still relevant. Most people panic when an old fear or doubt appears. They think, "I ruined it," or "I'm going backwards." But Neville would gently remind them, "You're not going backwards. You're clearing out the previous state." Just like an old house still smells like paint long after a renovation, the mind may still smell like the old assumptions. The key is not to fight it. Fighting feeds it. He often compared old thoughts to clouds passing through the sky. The clouds don't define the sky, they just drift through. Awareness is the key, Neville emphasized, because awareness allows someone to observe without attaching meaning. When an old thought surfaces, "This won't work and I don't deserve it and things always go wrong," the person can simply say, "Ah, that's the old me talking," and let it float away. The moment someone stops reacting to old thoughts, those thoughts lose oxygen. They fade, they become irrelevant. The law of assumption thoughts respond to the state, not the passing noise, and the state someone occupies now, the chosen state, is what determines the unfolding reality. Old thoughts are just echoes, not prophecies. Imagine someone who spent years believing they were unlucky. They shift their state through awareness, practice, and feeling. A week later, an old thought says, "See? Nothing ever works out." Instead of spiraling, they smile. They recognize the voice. It's familiar, but it's not true anymore. That simple recognition is what keeps the new state stable. Fighting would pull them back. Acknowledging frees them. He always emphasizes that you don't delete old thoughts, you outgrow them. When they appear, it's because the mind is reorganizing itself around a new identity. Old patterns rise so you can see them clearly and choose again. And each time you choose the new truth, the old assumption loses its hold. The subconscious begins rewiring itself accordingly. Neville explained that resisting an old thought gives it emotional charge. It's like trying not to think of a pink elephant. Suddenly it dominates your mind. But allowing the thought to exist without fear or judgment dissolves its influence. Imagination creates reality, but only when thought and feeling align. If the feeling stays anchored in the end, stray thoughts can't undo it. This is why gentle redirection is so important. When an old thought appears, the person can acknowledge it. That's from the old state. And then return to the new feeling. That return is the real creation. It's the moment they reclaim authorship. The Shift Your State Neville method isn't about perfection. It's about loyalty to the new identity. He tells students to celebrate these moments instead of fearing them. Every old thought that resurfaces is an opportunity to reinforce the new state. It's a chance to choose again, to embody the fulfilled end more deeply. Over time, the old thoughts appear less frequently, then rarely at all, and one day they stop coming back. And as these old mental patterns fade, the signs of rising awareness begin appearing, subtle but unmistakable indicators that the inner world is changing. He always tells people that transformation rarely starts with external miracles. It begins with inner evidence. The first signs are subtle, moments where someone reacts differently than they used to. Neville Goddard taught that every thought creates, and as awareness grows, those thoughts gain clarity rather than chaos. Someone who once spiraled easily now pauses, breathes, and responds from a quieter place. That's not coincidence, that's evolution. One of the clearest signs is emotional stability. Not perfection, but steadiness. When something inconvenient happens, a delay, a disagreement, an unexpected bill, the person no longer collapses into old assumptions. The law of assumption thoughts no longer drag them into fear. They stay grounded in their chosen state. They may still feel discomfort, but the response is calmer, softer, more conscious. He often explains that fewer spirals are not a sign that life got easier. They're a sign that the inner atmosphere changed. Someone who used to catastrophize now catches the pattern before it grows. Inner conversation, Neville Goddard emphasized, becomes kinder, more supportive, more aligned with the end. The mind stops being an enemy and starts becoming an ally. That shift alone can feel like a miracle. Another sign is neutrality. The person stops giving so much emotional weight to circumstances. A bank balance, a text message, a temporary setback, these used to trigger identity-level reactions. Now they're seen for what they are, surface-level data. Awareness is the key, Neville taught. And when awareness rises, circumstances lose their power to define someone's state. Synchronicities also begin appearing, small but meaningful external confirmations that the inner shift is working. The right people show up. Unexpected opportunities surface. Someone hears a phrase, sees a sign, receives an idea at the perfect moment. These are not coincidences. They're reflections of the new mental atmosphere. Imagination creates reality, and the outer world starts catching up. He often says that rising awareness feels like someone quietly rearranging furniture in a dark room. You don't see the full transformation at first, but you notice things feel different, more spacious, more aligned. The person stops needing reassurance because the reassurance comes from within. They trust their state more than their circumstances. Another sign is increased compassion toward oneself and others. The person stops attacking themselves for mistakes. They stop judging others harshly. They understand that everyone is acting from a state, and states shift. This compassion creates emotional room for growth. It indicates a deeper level of identity change, one that naturally stabilizes the new assumptions. He points out that creativity also increases. Ideas flow more easily, solutions appear faster. The person feels more inspired, more intuitive, more aware of internal nudges. Feeling it real, Neville method becomes effortless because the mind is no longer fighting itself. Creativity is the natural expression of a regulated nervous system and a stable state. Rising awareness also shows up as a sense of inevitability, a quiet knowing that the desired outcome is already in motion. The person doesn't need to obsess, worry, or micromanage. They simply feel aligned. There's a softness to their energy, a confidence that doesn't need proof. That feeling is a sign the subconscious has accepted the new story as true. These inner shifts always precede the outer ones. And as the inner world stabilizes, something deeper happens. The person begins to naturally think from the end instead of toward it. He always says that true transformation reveals itself when a person no longer has to remind themselves of the end. They live from it instinctively. Neville Goddard taught that imagination creates reality, and when someone stabilizes in the desired state, the imagination begins working on their behalf. They don't force thoughts anymore. The mind automatically gravitates toward the fulfilled version of them. Every thought creates, but now those thoughts emerge from the right identity. Most people begin this journey by deliberately guiding their inner conversation, redirecting doubts, shifting reactions. But deep embodiment is different. It's when the new assumptions stop feeling like practices and start feeling like home. The law of assumption thoughts no longer feel like tools. They feel like the natural language of the mind. This is the moment the inner world clicks into alignment. He explains that when someone thinks from the end, they no longer ask, "When will it happen?" or "How will it unfold?" Those questions fade because they no longer belong to the identity of the person who has the desire. Inner conversation, Neville Goddard style, becomes simple, calm, and supportive. The mental noise quiets down. The person moves through life with a subtle but unmistakable sense of certainty. Imagine someone who once felt financially insecure. In deep embodiment, they no longer react with fear when money is mentioned. They don't feel tension when paying bills. They don't interpret challenges as signs of lack. Instead, their automatic reaction is neutrality or confidence. That shift is not forced, it's natural. It shows the inner state has changed at the root. He often describes deep embodiment as the moment the subconscious finally accepts the new story as the only story. The mind stops offering contradictory narratives. It stops presenting old fears as if they're relevant. Feeling it real Neville method becomes effortless because the feeling is no longer something the person has to generate. It's something they are. The body, emotions, and thoughts all align silently. Another sign of deep embodiment is reduced mental effort. Someone who once spent hours visualizing now needs only a breath or a thought to reconnect with the desired state. They feel stable, rooted. Their imagination works behind the scenes without conscious direction. Awareness is the key, Neville emphasized, and in this phase, awareness is gentle. It's simply noticing how aligned everything already feels. He often says that in deep embodiment, the mind becomes an ally instead of an opponent. The person doesn't have to argue with themselves anymore. They don't negotiate with doubt or debate with old assumptions. The mind simply supports the chosen identity. The inner world feels quieter, warmer, and more cooperative. Life stops being a struggle and becomes a partnership. Someone in this state begins interpreting life through a new lens. Challenges feel temporary rather than defining. Delays feel like timing rather than rejection. Opportunities feel natural instead of surprising. Synchronicities increase because the outer world mirrors the inner consistency. Imagination creates reality more quickly because the internal resistance has dissolved. He teaches that this level of embodiment doesn't require perfection, just persistence. Once someone stabilizes in the new state, the world responds as if the desire has already crystallized. They act differently, speak differently, choose differently, not out of discipline but out of identity. They have shifted their center of gravity, and this quiet, natural embodiment sets the stage for Neville's final truth, that while every thought creates, it's awareness that determines which thoughts become reality, pointing directly into the final topic. He always concludes by reminding people that creation is constant. There is no pause button, no neutral state, no empty moment. Neville Goddard taught that every thought creates, but it's awareness that determines which thoughts take root and which ones fade into nothing. The mind generates thousands of ideas a day, but only the ones nourished by awareness, feeling, and assumption shape the world. He explains that awareness acts like a spotlight. Wherever someone shines it, the subconscious begins building. If they shine it on fear, fear grows. If they shine it on lack, lack expands. But when they shine it on the fulfilled end, the identity they choose, the state they decide to occupy, the law of assumption thoughts begin rearranging everything to match. Reality bends toward whatever awareness consistently returns to. Most people let their awareness drift to old stories, old assumptions, old emotions. They wonder why life repeats itself. But once someone understands that awareness is the key Neville emphasized endlessly, they stop letting the mind wander without direction. They choose deliberately, they assume with intention, and they begin experiencing the quiet authority of someone who creates from the inside out. He always says that the world doesn't respond to what someone wants. It responds to what they are aware of being. Someone can want abundance but stay aware of lack. They can want love but stay aware of loneliness. They can want success but stay aware of fear. Imagination creates reality, but only the assumed identity becomes flesh. Awareness selects the seed, feeling grows it. When someone chooses consciously, the entire inner atmosphere changes. Their reactions soften. Their inner talk becomes supportive. Their emotional tone lifts. Inner conversation, Neville Goddard taught, becomes aligned with the end rather than the problem. The person stops fighting the world and starts leading it. Their awareness becomes the compass, and the world follows its direction. He often describes conscious awareness as a spiritual skill, one that transforms the ordinary into the miraculous. Instead of trying to change circumstances, the person changes the state from which they perceive those circumstances. They shift your state Neville style by committing to the end, and from that commitment, the world begins moving pieces into place with uncanny precision. Someone anchored in the chosen assumption doesn't need evidence to feel secure. They don't wait for confirmation. They are the confirmation. Their feeling it real Neville method becomes second nature. They walk through life with a quiet expectancy, knowing the outer world will eventually match their inner conviction, and it always does. He emphasizes that conscious choosing is not a one-time act. It's a way of living, a gentle returning, again and again, to the inner truth, the truth of who someone has decided to be. Over time, the chosen state becomes natural, familiar, inevitable. And once it becomes natural, manifestation stops being a process and becomes a reflection. In the end, the message is simple but life-changing. Every thought creates, but awareness is what gives thoughts life. When someone chooses the right thoughts and occupies the right identity, their world has no choice but to reshape itself around that choice. Consciousness leads, reality follows, and with this understanding, the entire journey comes full circle. Awareness, assumption, feeling, and identity merging into the creative power Neville dedicated his life to teaching. If you've come this far, then something inside you is already shifting. Maybe you noticed your thoughts more clearly today. Maybe you caught an old assumption resurfacing. Maybe you realized that your inner world has been shaping your outer world all along. The question now is simple. What will you do with this awareness? Will you keep feeding the thoughts that keep you stuck, or will you choose the ones that match the life you truly want? Will you continue reacting from old states, or will you embody the version of you that already lives in the end? Will you keep waiting for proof, or will you become the proof? Your transformation begins the moment you decide to think from the end and stay there. Awareness is your greatest tool, and every thought you choose with intention becomes a step toward a new reality. If this message resonated with you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us. There's so much more to learn, and your new state is just beginning to unfold.